She stood on the auction block, wrists bruised, eyes unbroken. He stepped forward not for charity, but to end the ugliness he saw too much of in men like Crane. That choice would change more than her fate. Grant McCall and Clara Boone, two souls shackled by guilt and pride, would learn that freedom without trust is only another kind of cage. Soon, they'd find themselves building a life neither thought they deserved. The sun was sinking low over Clay Ridge, turning the dust red as blood when Clara Boone was led out into the yard. The laughter around her was sharp, ugly, the kind that made decent men look away. Silas Crane leaned against the saloon post, boots polished, smile thin. "Debt's due," he said, rolling the words between his teeth like smoke. "She can work it off, or someone can pay what she owes." Grant McCall had been passing through. He wasn't a man who lingered in other folks' troubles. But when he saw the woman standing there, hands bound with rope, chin lifted in defiance despite the bruises, something in him refused to keep walking. He stepped forward through the crowd until his shadow stretched across the dirt between them. How much? His voice was low even, the crowd went still. Crane's eyes flicked over him, measuring. "Depends who's asking." Grant tossed a small leather pouch onto the table. Coins spilled out, dull and heavy. "Enough?" Crane chuckled, slow and mean. "For her debt, sure. Freedom's a different price." Grant didn't blink. "Then add it." For a moment all that moved was the wind. Then Crane shrugged, tore a page from his ledger, and scribbled a few words before sliding it across. "She's yours to deal with now." Grant took the paper and turned toward Clara. Her gaze met his, steady, hard as flint. "You're free," he said quietly. "I don't need saving," she replied, voice hoarse but proud. "Good," Grant said. "I'm not a savior." He turned and walked away. The crowd muttered, disappointed that the spectacle was over. For a long second, Clara didn't move. Then, with a single sharp breath, she followed. The evening air cooled fast as they reached his wagon. He untied his horse in silence. "Where does a free woman go now?" he asked without looking back. "Anywhere but here," she answered. "Ranch is 6 miles out," he said. "You can ride with me, work if you choose. Or walk if you'd rather prove a point." Clara's jaw tightened. "I'll ride, but I don't owe you a damn thing." Grant climbed onto the seat and flicked the reins. "Never said you did." They rode into the dark. The town lights faded behind them, replaced by the sound of crickets and the creak of worn wheels. She kept her arms folded, every line of her body drawn tight. Grant didn't speak again, but he felt her presence, sharp, wary, alive. By the time the ranch lights came into view, the sky had deepened to indigo. 2 lanterns swayed on the porch beams, their glow soft against the night. Grant stopped the wagon and pointed toward the barn. "You can bed there tonight. Water pump's out back. We'll talk in the morning." Clara climbed down, skirts brushing against the wheel. "Don't expect gratitude," she muttered. Grant almost smiled. Wouldn't know what to do with it anyway. She disappeared into the barn and the door closed with a hollow echo. Grant stood for a moment, watching the flicker of light under the slats. The paper in his pocket felt heavier than it should have, like a promise he hadn't meant to make. Inside, Clara sat on a bale of hay, the smell of horses thick in the air. No locks, no shouting, no hands dragging her back. Only silence, and a man outside she couldn't yet read. She pulled her knees close and whispered into the dark, "Don't trust it." Not yet. Out by the porch, Grant poured himself a measure of coffee gone cold. He stared at the horizon where the last strip of red was fading into blue. He'd done what was right. But the right thing, he realized, had a way of changing a man's life before he knew he'd signed for it. Morning came with the low hum of cicadas and the smell of dust lifting off the earth. Clara Boone woke to the creak of boards above her and the faint scrape of boots outside the barn. For a moment she forgot where she was. No chains, no shouting, just sunlight streaming through the gaps in the planks. Then memory caught up. The auction, the man with the quiet eyes, the freedom she hadn't asked for. Grant McCall was already at the corral, moving slow and sure among the horses. He worked like a man who didn't waste breath on anything he couldn't mend with his own hands. Clara watched from the shadows of the barn door, torn between curiosity and the instinct to keep her distance. He looked up once, catching her gaze. "Coffee's hot," he said simply. "Kitchen's through the side porch. She hesitated, arms folded. You always offer breakfast to strangers? Only the ones I paid too much for. His tone was dry, not unkind. She nearly smiled, almost, but didn't. Instead, she walked toward the porch, her bare feet stirring the red dust. The cabin was plain but clean. Wooden shelves lined with jars, a blackened stove, 2 tin cups waiting by a coffee pot. Everything had a place, even the silence. Grant poured her a cup without asking. You from Clay Ridge? No. She wrapped her hands around the mug, its warmth biting her palms. Farther east, place that don't matter now. He nodded once. You plan to stay long? That depends, she said. You hiring or just collecting strays? Grant leaned against the table, eyes steady on her. You can work if you want. Cookhouse needs tending, but you're free to ride out any time. Free, she repeated softly, the word catching somewhere between disbelief and mockery. You talk like you understand it. Don't have to understand it, he said. Just respect it. The screen door rattled in the wind. For a moment, neither spoke. Then she pushed her cup away. I'll earn my keep, she said. Don't want your pity shadowing me around here. Wouldn't fit you anyway. That earned him the smallest flicker of a smirk before she turned and walked toward the wash basin outside. The day stretched long and hot. Clara worked beside the ranch hands, silent but steady, scrubbing tools, mending fence wire, feeding the chickens that darted around her boots. The men eyed her at first. Crane's property turned ranch hand, but Grant's sharp stare kept them honest. He didn't need to say a word. His kind of authority came from how still he could stand while others fidgeted. By late afternoon, Clara was sweating through her dress, dust streaking her arms. She felt every muscle ache, but it was a clean ache, earned by her own will. When Grant passed her a canteen, she took it without a word and drank deep. You're not used to stopping, he said quietly. Stops are where the trouble starts, she replied. He studied her for a long moment. Trouble already knows where to find you, Clara, her eyes flashed. Then it can try. Something like respect passed between them, wordless, taut, real. That night, the ranch settled into its slow rhythm, coyotes yipping in the hills, the creak of the windmill turning. Grant sat on the porch, oil lamp beside him, polishing his old rifle. Inside, he could hear Clara humming low as she washed dishes, a tune without words, carried from some other life. He looked toward the barn where the horses shifted in their stalls, then up at the stars smeared across the wide black sky. He'd thought buying her freedom would ease the guilt that had followed him for years, the kind that money never fixed. But guilt didn't fade. It just changed shape. Clara stepped outside then, drying her hands on a rag. The lamplight brushed against her hair, softening the lines the world had carved there. You don't sleep much, she said. Not when there's still work worth doing. Like saving people who don't need saving? Grant met her gaze, maybe just reminding them they can stop running. She said nothing, but her eyes lingered on him longer this time before she disappeared back inside. The door closed softly, leaving Grant alone with the desert wind. He set the rifle aside and let out a slow breath. The night felt different, lighter, and somehow more dangerous. Because for the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about what he'd lost. He was thinking about what he might want to keep. By the next morning, the air had shifted. A wall of gray clouds bruised the horizon, promising a storm that never asked permission. Grant McCall stood near the fence line, tightening the post wire before the wind tore it loose. Behind him, the sky rumbled low. Inside the barn, Clara Boone worked with her sleeves rolled high, sorting grain sacks that leaked through split seams. Storm will hit before sundown, Grant called over the gust. I've seen worse, she answered, tugging the knot tight on a burlap bag. Wind's just noise. It's people that ruin things. Grant glanced toward her. You always that sure of where danger comes from? Sure enough to still be standing. She hefted the bag and walked past him toward the storage shed, chin high. By noon the light had gone strange, the kind that made color drain from everything but the land itself. Dust danced across the field like restless ghosts. Grant sent the ranch hands home early, but Clara refused to stop. She moved between the barn and cookhouse, tying tarps, securing windows, ignoring the way the wind pulled at her skirt. Leave it, Grant ordered finally. Roof'll hold, she shot him a look. You say that like you can promise it. Been through enough storms to know what stays standing. "Then you ain't seen mine," she said quietly. The words hung there, heavy as thunder. Grant almost asked what she meant, but the wind made talk useless. So he followed her instead. Two figures braced against a world intent on testing what they were made of. When the rain came, it came hard. Sheets of water slammed the tin roof, drowning the sound of their footsteps. They ducked into the barn, dripping, breath ragged, surrounded by the restless snort of horses. Grant lit a lantern, its glow trembling against the walls. "Stay put," he said. "Storm will pass faster if you don't pace holes in my floor." Clara crossed her arms. "I don't hide from weather." He met her stare, something fierce flickering between them. "Ain't hiding, just surviving smarter." Lightning cracked outside, painting the world white for a heartbeat. She flinched barely, and he noticed. "Don't like thunder?" "Don't like feeling trapped," she said. "Reminds me of when Crane locked the cellar door after..." She stopped herself. The sentence hung unfinished. Grant set the lantern down and took a step closer, careful, measured. "You're not there anymore," he said. Clara looked at him, jaw trembling just once before she forced it still. "You think a door's the only thing that keeps someone caged?" He didn't answer. Instead, he pulled a wool blanket from a stall post and offered it. She hesitated, then took it, clutching the edges like armor. For a long while, the only sound was the storm raging beyond the walls and the slow rhythm of horses breathing. When she finally spoke again, her voice was softer. "Why'd you do it?" "Do what?" "Pay for me." Grant looked down, rainwater dripping from his hair. "Because I was tired of men like Crane deciding what people are worth." She studied him through the dim light. "And what's your worth, rancher?" Grant huffed a laugh. "Whatever's left after this place takes its share." Something in his honesty disarmed her. The hardness in her shoulders eased a little. She sat on an overturned bucket, the blanket wrapped around her. "You don't talk much," she said. "Words don't fix fences." "No," she said quietly. "But they build walls just as quick." Grant leaned against a post, watching the rain pour through the gaps in the roof. "Then maybe we start tearing a few down." For a long moment, neither moved. Then Clara's lips parted like she wanted to answer, but thunder rolled again, shaking the rafters. Grant crossed the space between them and steadied her hand where it gripped the blanket. "Just the storm," he murmured. "Nothing more." She met his eyes. The lantern flame flickered between them, throwing light and shadow across their faces, one scarred by loss, the other by survival. Outside, the rain softened, leaving behind only the low hiss of wind and the smell of wet dust. When it was finally quiet, Clara whispered, "You should get some sleep." He nodded, but didn't move. "You too." As he turned to leave, she called after him, voice almost lost to the wind. "Grant." "Thank you." He paused at the door, looking back at her silhouette in the lantern glow. "Wasn't charity, Clara. Just decency." But when he stepped into the rain again, he knew that wasn't the truth, not anymore. What he felt wasn't guilt. It was something deeper, quieter, and far more dangerous. The storm left the land raw and clean. By morning, puddles shimmered between the sagebrush, and the air smelled of wet clay and horses. Clara Boone stepped out of the barn barefoot, the hem of her skirt heavy with dew. Grant McCall was already at the trough, sleeves rolled, water dripping from his forearms as he checked the pump. "You always fix things before breakfast?" she asked. "Only what might break before noon." She almost smiled, but something in his tone carried a weight she recognized, habit born from loss. "What broke you first, Grant?" she asked quietly. He looked up, caught off guard by the question. "My brother," he said after a moment. Winter took him. "I thought working harder would bury it." Clara nodded slowly. "Work don't bury anything, just keeps it breathing quieter." Their eyes met for a beat too long before Grant turned back to the pump. "You should eat," he said. "I will. After chores." The day pressed on under a sky that couldn't decide between sun and shadow. Clara moved through her tasks with practiced rhythm, mending, sweeping, feeding the chickens that trailed her like small ghosts. The ranch hands had grown used to her now. They spoke in nods and half smiles, in quiet respect that didn't need words. By mid-afternoon, the stagecoach from Clay Ridge arrived in a plume of dust. Grant went to meet it, uneasy. The driver handed him a folded letter sealed in red wax. Grant broke it open, his jaw tightening as he read. Clara noticed the shift in him immediately. "What is it?" "Silas Crane," he said, voice hardening. Says the papers I paid weren't legal. Claims he still owns your debt. Clara froze. He can't. He'll try, Grant cut in. He's bringing a marshal next week to make it look proper. Her throat went dry. Then I'll leave before he gets here. Grant stepped closer. That's what he wants. Keep you running till you wear down. He won't stop. Clara met his gaze, anger flickering through the fear. Then maybe I should stop running. Grant's jaw set. You're not facing him alone. That night, tension hung thicker than the heat. The ranch seemed to hold its breath. Grant sat at the table with a stack of old receipts and a half-empty whiskey bottle, trying to find some legal loophole. Clara stood by the window, watching lightning crawl across the far hills. You think paper's gonna save us? She asked. He sighed. Paper's what men like Crane hide behind. But if it's all he understands, I'll use it. She turned to him, eyes fierce. What if it isn't enough? Grant looked up. Then we do it another way. The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken things. Then slowly, Clara crossed the room. Why do you care this much? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. You don't even know me. He met her eyes. Maybe not, but I know what it's like to lose something that didn't deserve it. For the first time, her defenses faltered. She sank into the chair across from him, hands twisting in her lap. Every time someone's tried to help me, she said, it's cost me more than what they gave. This time's different. She laughed softly, but it wasn't mocking. It was tired. You keep saying that like you can promise it. I don't promise, he said. I prove. The lamp flickered between them, throwing their shadows against the wall. Two shapes that didn't quite touch, but leaned toward each other all the same. After a while, Clara reached for the folded deed lying beside his elbow. You keep this near like it's sacred, she murmured. Grant looked at the paper, then at her. It's just proof of what I paid. She met his gaze, steady. Then stopped carrying it like proof. You bought a choice, not a person. He didn't answer, but something in him shifted. The paper felt suddenly lighter, meaningless. He folded it once, then slid it across the table toward her. You keep it, he said quietly. Might as well belong to the only one it matters to. Clara stared at it, then at him. You really think that makes me free? Grant shook his head. No, I think you already were. You just needed someone to say it out loud. She swallowed hard, words failing her. The rain began again outside, soft this time, like applause against the roof. Clara rose slowly and placed the paper back in his hand, not out of refusal, but trust. Then we'll both keep it, she said, for what it cost us. Grant looked up at her, and for the first time, didn't see the woman he'd paid for. He saw the woman who'd stayed. The dawn came red and mean, bleeding through the dust that never settled. Grant McCall was already saddled when Clara stepped out of the barn, her hair loose, face pale but steady. The news had spread through Clay Ridge before the sun rose. Silas Crane was riding in with the marshal to reclaim what he called his property. You don't have to be here when they come, Grant said, voice rough. You can take my horse and ride north. They won't follow far. Clara tightened her shawl. And run again? No. If I leave now, he wins. Grant met her eyes, searching for fear, but finding only resolve. Then we stand. The sound came before noon, hoofbeats, slow and deliberate. The dust plume carried 3 riders, Crane in his polished coat, the marshal beside him, and another man holding a sealed envelope like judgment. They reined in before the porch. Crane dismounted, every inch of him smug. McCall, he drawled, you got something that belongs to me. Grant stepped down from the porch, boots sinking into the dry earth. If you're talking about Miss Boone, you're already wrong. The marshal cleared his throat, opening the envelope. Legal documents show she's indebted property until repayment in full. She's paid, Grant said, voice low but solid. He pulled a folded paper from his coat, the same deed she'd handed back the night before. That's her signature. That's my payment, Crane sneered. That scrap ain't worth the ink. You think buying her off my books makes her yours? That woman'll never... Enough! Clara's voice cut through, sharp as a blade. She stepped forward, bare feet on dust, eyes blazing. You think men like you get to write who I am? You sold my labor, not my soul. That debt died the minute I walked off your floor. The marshal looked uncertain, sweat beading on his temple. Ma'am, the law don't see women like me, she said, stepping closer. But these folks do. Behind her, the ranch hands emerged from the barn, forming a quiet wall. Old Tom, Eli, Rosa, Every worker whose wages Grant had paid fair stood beside her now. Grant didn't have to call them. They'd already decided. Crane's smirk faltered. "You really think a few ranch hands can—" Grant interrupted. "They ain't ranch hands today. They're witnesses." Silence pressed in. The marshal shifted, uneasy. "Crane," he said slowly, "you didn't mention this was about ownership of a person. That's outlawed under territorial code." Crane's face darkened. She owes no man," Grant said, stepping forward until they were inches apart. "And you're leaving." For a moment, Crane's hand twitched near his holster, but Grant didn't flinch. He just stared, calm and deadly sure. Something in that steadiness broke the other man's courage. Crane spat into the dust, swung onto his horse, and spat one last threat. "This ain't over." Grant's reply was quiet. "It is if you ride away," and Crane did. No more speeches, no more papers. Just retreat swallowed by the wind. When the sound of hoofbeats faded, Clara exhaled shakily. The marshal tipped his hat awkwardly and followed the others down the trail, leaving only silence and the scent of dust and rain. She turned to Grant. "You risked everything for me." He shook his head. "No, for what was right." "But you didn't have to," she said. Grant looked at her, the faintest smile touching his mouth. "You think I'd trade my peace for coin?" "You've already given more than you know," Clara frowned. "What did I give?" "Reason to stop living like I'm paying off ghosts." Her breath caught. For once, she didn't argue. She just stepped closer until their hands brushed. The sky above them cracked open, not with lightning, but with light clean and gold after days of storm. Later, as the ranch quieted, Clara stood on the porch watching Grant repair the fence by the fading sun. The wind carried the smell of mesquite and rain-wet soil. For the first time in years, she felt no pull to run. Grant joined her, wiping dust from his hands. "You staying?" She smiled faintly. "Depends if you're still hiring." He studied her a moment, then said softly, "I'm done hiring. But I'd sure like a partner." Clara's eyes shone in the last light. "Then I reckon I'm home." The wind moved through the fields, gentle now, whispering over the fence posts they'd both fought to hold upright. Freedom at last wasn't something written. It was something lived.